Chris, it's the end of an era. The end of an era.
How do I say goodbye to all your drops?
Let's get this sucker started.
Get dialed in, Panthers fans. Here comes an in-depth look at your team. Exclusive interviews. Locker room insight.
Ready?
Let's huddle up.
Let's just do it, okay?
For Panthers Playbook, driven by Carolina Ford Dealers. Here are your hosts, Dennis Cox and Chris Lea.
Welcome back to another episode of Panthers Playbook. That's Chris Lea, Dennis Cox here with you. Make sure you subscribe here on the Fans YouTube page. And most importantly, leave your thoughts in the comments because we're breaking down the 53-man roster, the initial 53-man roster for the Carolina Panthers here on Panthers Playbook, sponsored by Carolina Ford Dealers. Wherever you go, whatever you do, with the power and technology of a Ford F-150 on your team, it's game on. See your Carolina Ford dealer today. Chris, I know we were pretty close. We're roughly, you and I were both around 45, 46 names right when it comes to the 53-man roster. But let's be honest, I think the 53-man roster that we saw released on Tuesday is not going to be the same that we're going to see Wednesday or even Thursday. This process is far from over.
Far from over. Of course, we're going to have to see, of course, tomorrow, as we're recording this on Tuesday, tomorrow, there could be some new additions claimed from the waiver wire. And then also, like, at a certain point, we also knew that there are certain guys with injury designations that are going to have to be brought back at some point this season.
Yep.
You got a few guys like that. So there's some names here that are definitely expendable in those cases. So I think this is a good start to the roster. We also didn't know, as far as from our projections, who the coaching staff, I guess, put more value in than others. And so clearly they see something in Jalen Coker, even though I think he could eventually end up on the practice squad.
Yep.
Once, other guys are either claimed or guys come off of their injury designations. But those are the things that we couldn't have, predicted. But it's interesting to see how all of that has happened. I think somebody like Andrew Rame, the backup center, played his way on the initial 53-man roster. There's different things that kind of factor in. But I'm excited to see what the Panthers do with this group.
There are a lot of different things, and the big one that's a surprise yet not a surprise is Terrace Marshall Jr. getting cut. That's what we talked about, the end of an era.
Yeah.
The end of an era, Terrace Marshall Jr. Again, surprised but not surprised because you and I talked about it. If you're fifth wide receiver on any roster, you want your fifth wide receiver to be able to play special teams. That's something Terrace Marshall Jr. doesn't do. Yeah. He just doesn't do it. So that's why Ihmir Smith-Marsette, more valuable as your fifth guy. David Moore, fifth, sixth guy. Jalen Coker, that one was probably the most surprising to me amongst the wide receiver group because they kept 7. I was kind of shocked by that. But maybe they kept 7 knowing, all right, depending if there's a wide receiver out there that we don't like and we don't really want to make any claims, at least we have this group going forward. But that one's probably the biggest shock to me was the fact that there are 7 wideouts and only 3 tight ends.
Yeah,
at least on the offensive side of the ball. Defense, we'll get into that here in just a sec.
That was definitely one of those things that, because we thought that, Jordan Matthews had done enough to play his way on the roster. I think when I was initially doing my roster cut down, I thought about 7 wide receivers, but the way Jordan Matthews was playing, it was like, he's got to be on the roster. So I chose 4 tight ends to 6 wide receivers. But Jalen Coker is somebody they were clearly been high on for a while. Steve Smith really likes him, calls him, basically one of the best route runners that came out of this rookie class. Somebody that they probably can look towards in the future to lean on. It feels like maybe a future Adam Thielen replacement with the way that he plays and all that. He's not a speedy guy, but if he's a precise route runner, he's somebody who could probably get open in different situations and maybe play well out of the slot. So we'll see what ends up happening with him there. But again, that's somebody I think eventually moves to the practice squad. And just really the big surprise for me, TMJ wasn't as much of a surprise, but the big surprise was definitely Jordan Matthews not being on the first 53-man roster.
And we made a post on the fans YouTube page. This is where you got to subscribe. You got to know these things, folks. That make sure you hit that notification bell so you don't miss anything we post. We asked a question of what's your biggest surprises, and we actually had a few people chime in because we were going to use it on the show today, including VB Davis saying the one that disappoints me most was Jordan Matthews. I feel like he did everything he could do this offseason. Can't believe we cut him, and we're continuing to hold Ian Thomas. Same thing comes from PKM 3096. Jordan Matthews being cut, but Ian Thomas once again survives. We're seeing this a lot from Panthers fans. They're like, wait a second. We saw Jordan Matthews on one drive with the starting offense in a preseason game, and he looked far more competent in terms of pass catching than we've ever seen from Ian Thomas, probably ever. And then all of a sudden, Jordan Matthews is gone. But Ian Thomas sticks around. With Ian Thomas dealing with a calf injury, I thought that's actually the reason why they're going to keep Ford, just to have that little bit of insurance. So, Chris, a lot of fans are thinking the same thing that we are.
Well, I never thought that Ian Thomas was on outs, right? Like I thought
he was going to stay, but Jordan Matthews not coming.
Yeah, Jordan Matthews. Yeah, they're thinking the same thing we're thinking about Jordan Matthews. But I just want to address Ian Thomas really quick. Pass catching is definitely a huge part of being a tight end, but it's not the only part about being a tight end.
Mm-hmm.
Ian Thomas has been a spectacular blocker over the last few years. I mean, if you look at, especially during that little stretch where we had Steve Wilkes as the interim head coach, if you look at some of the long runs that were there and a lot of the big plays that ended up happening during his tenure, Ian Thomas was there as like one of the big blockers, like literally pushing people like 10, 20, 30 yards down the field. He has a skill set that is valuable to any team. No, is he the best receiving tight end? He's not. But I think that he's definitely somebody that's valuable. I don't want to look at this as a Ian Thomas over Jordan Matthews type of thing. It feels like it was another position that kept Jordan Matthews off of the team, whether it's one of the 10 offensive linemen or one of the 7 wide receivers. I don't think it was anybody in that tight end room that kept Jordan Matthews off of the 53-man roster.
By the way, Ian Thomas is in the last year of his contract, and if you released him, the cap hit would have been the same. You're not going to save any money by letting him go.
That's the other reason.
That's also plays a factor into this too. But I was a little bit surprised by that. But nonetheless, they can still bring Jordan Matthews back on the practice squad. Another guy that could potentially be brought back to the roster we're hearing is running back Mike Boone. This also kind of applies to Jordan Matthews as well. My guess is there are a couple guys on the roster at this moment that they might look to put, the Panthers might look to put on injured reserve with a designation to return. Now, on cutdown day, you're allowed to use 2 players put on injured reserve with a designation to return. That way you don't have to put them on the 53, then put them on IR, waive a guy, re-sign. So you're allowed to do that with 2 players. Panthers did that with Dane Jackson, the corner, and Sam Franklin at safety.
Yeah, those make sense.
I think there are a couple of guys on this roster, on the 53, that might look to go to injured reserve, which in that case you can bring back a Mike Boone. For example, Cade Mays has been dealing with a shoulder injury. I remember correctly, he didn't play in that Bills game. Depending on the extent of that injury, they might put him on IR so he can be on the injured reserve for 3-4 weeks till he's healthy, which allows you to bring back Mike Boone until Jonathan Brooks is healthy after the first 4 weeks of the season because he's on the non-football injury list. Same thing goes with a guy like Jaden Crumedy. We haven't seen Jaden Crumedy, the rookie 6th-round pick out of Mississippi State, since the first preseason game against the New England Patriots. I'm wondering if he's a guy that also gets put on IR and they can add a waiver claim possibly as well. I think that's the reason why they kept 7 defensive linemen, which was another shock for me. I was like, wait a second, 70 linemen, and one of them wasn't TJ Smith? That one kind of actually surprised me a little bit to see PV make it over TJ Smith and 7 defensive linemen being kept.
Yeah, we were thinking about 5 of those guys, and I think mine put, I think I had an extra person for outside linebacker as well. With, I was saying like the last person that could be cut for that position was Luigi Villain, and he wasn't there. So that doesn't necessarily surprise me. But yeah, I mean those are the areas that you look at. It's easy to cut when guys like Amari Barno or DJ Wanham are able to return. You talk about Dane Jackson and Sam Franklin. You see these areas where there's some easy guys to kind of move around and cut when those guys returned. So I was surprised, though, that it was that many defensive linemen. I do remember, though, that they wanted to try to really we talked about this earlier in the training camp where Canales was saying they want to like trade those guys in and out so that they're fresh on the defensive line. So maybe that's some of the thought process. But I just don't know if they're going to keep that many throughout the duration of this season on the defensive line. So we'll see how they end up massaging that as time goes along.
Yeah, I know Evero, the defensive coordinator, likes to rotate a lot of guys in and out throughout the game. So the fact that they added A'Shawn Robinson, we saw Nick Thurman and LeBron Ray do some good stuff as depth players. Like, hey, going for like 4 or 5 snaps, at a time, and then you can rotate guys through. I think that definitely is going to help the depth on that defensive line. By the way, real quick, the Panthers kept every single one of their draft picks from last year, all 5 of them: Bryce Young, Jonathan Mingo, DJ Johnson, Chandler Zavala, Jamie Robinson, and they have 6 of their 7 picks on the roster this year. Mm-hmm. Which hopefully that's a turn from what we saw the previous 3 drafts.
It's a good sign.
Here's a note from 2020 through 2022. Those 3 drafts, the Panthers selected 28 players. I'm sorry, 24 players. Only 8 of them are still on the roster right now.
Oof.
8 of 24. That's it. 8, and I even included Amari Barno because he's all physically unavailable. I still counted Amari Barno, but you're looking at Derrick Brown's the only player from 2020 still left.
Yeah.
That's it. 2021, J.C. Horn, Brady Christensen, Tommy Tremble, Chuba Hubbard, no longer Terrace Marshall Jr. And then from 2022, it's Ike Ekwonu, it's Cade Mays, and Amari Barno. That's it from those 3 drafts. That's it.
And, it's one of those things. It shows I think that Matt Rule and his regime did a decent job of drafting for what they wanted. Mm-hmm. But they were also running a college program in the NFL. So when 2 other coaching staffs come in after you, a lot of those guys are just going to be gone, right? Yep. So it's kind of shocking, kind of not shocking at the same time. But, hopefully with this new regime, whether they're here in 5 years or not, that the draft picks that they make over the next few years are people that can stick around and that can, help this team move into the right direction. That's really what you want from any team.
And hopefully you find some diamonds in the rough, undrafted free agents. You mentioned Jalen Coker. You mentioned Andrew Rame. Damani Richardson making the roster as a safety. You talk about a guy that played his way onto the roster.
Absolutely.
Dude, props to you, man.
He was catching everything, man. They might need to move him to receiver.
You need another one? Another one. Who are some players that you think, or what positions do you think are out there where you see the Carolina Panthers making waiver claims? Remember, they get first dibs on players that have to go through waivers. Now, there's a difference between players that have to go through waivers and free agents. For example, a vested veteran like Mike Boone, like Jordan Matthews, those guys are automatic free agents. A team can sign them immediately right now, don't have to do a waiver claim. But players who have less than 4 years of experience in the NFL, like a Terrace Marshall Jr., they have to go through waivers and teams can make a claim on them. Panthers have first dibs on claims for players that have to go through waivers. They get number 1. A player that got released today that I'm kind of excited about that might potentially make the team. Dude from West Forsyth High School. Right there in your old neck of the woods in Winston-Salem. KJ Henry. Let's go. Let's go. Right. I want to see KJ Henry on this roster.
Listen, if the Panthers pick up KJ Henry, I'm legit calling his mom and having her come on this podcast.
Let's go.
I am friends.
Make it happen
with KJ Henry's mom. Just for background for people to know, this isn't just because I know KJ Henry and I like KJ Henry. He's legit a good player. Mm-hmm. And I was watching the Washington Commanders game versus who was it? The Bengals. I can't remember who they went against on Sunday night.
It was the Patriots.
Against the Patriots. KJ popped off the screen a few times, and I didn't get a chance to really watch him a lot with the Washington Commanders last year. So I didn't, I was kind of keeping up from afar, but I didn't get a chance to actually sit and watch him play in an NFL jersey. Sunday was my first chance to really see that. And when I tell you that this guy got to the quarterback, he was around the ball. Like, I thought that the system that he was, playing in Washington kind of suit him better than what he did at Clemson, honestly, because I felt like I saw him show what he could fully be potentially in the NFL in that particular game. And so when I saw that the Commanders let him go, one, I was shocked. But then secondly, it was like, all right, Panthers fans have been asking for a while. When are we going to get our big-time Clemson player? We always get South Carolina players. We draft South Carolina players. The Panthers have never drafted a player from Clemson. And so now this is an opportunity to do that. And he's from North Carolina. Grew up in Winston-Salem. His dad is a former assistant football coach at UNC Charlotte, former assistant football coach over at NC State, former assistant football coach at Catawba. Like, the Henry family, they are athletes out here. Like his little brother, Isaiah Henry, is coming up. Look at him. He's a up and coming young basketball player. I think he's going into his senior season. He's going to be playing for Overtime Elite. And so he's going to be playing probably for an ACC school, in the next coming years. So I'm just saying all that to say that the Henrys are athletes, and KJ Henry is somebody that you would love to have on the team. One, because he plays hard. Two, because he's smart. Three, he's a great teammate. And four, he's great in the community. Here's somebody who his dad was going through some really big health issues, needed kidney replacement. In the first year that NIL was a thing, he used his name, image, and likeness to raise over six figures for his father to get a kidney replacement. Listen, this guy is selfless. Yeah. He's a teammate, right? And he's going to be good for the roster. He's good for the team. And I know this because I've known him since his sophomore year in high school. And right now with the guys who are currently on our team, as far as like outside linebacker, hate to say it. We can make room for him by cutting Ekuliota.
Yeah.
I might even say Kaylavon Chason, as maybe a future replacement for him, because he's on a 1-year deal.
1 year deal,
if he
$5 million.
And if he doesn't prove it this year, KJ Henry is a cheaper option and probably could get you the same production value that Kaylavon Chason would give you.
And KJ Henry in Washington last year, the limited games that he did play special teams as well, which is something that, again, not everyone is willing to do or capable of doing. So he's willing to do that as well. I think that is certainly an option because, again, teams just generally don't give up edge rushers too easily, but I like him as a potential player to be on this roster.
Yes.
I also think that there's a chance that they still go for a corner. Now, I think the trade for Michael Jackson changes things because now you have Michael Jackson, who's probably going to start for you week 1 opposite of J.C. Horn. Yeah. Then you have Troy Hill as a nickel. You have Shaw Smith-Wade in the mix as well. We also look at corner Deshaun Jameson as well. I still think there's a chance that they might make a play for a corner if there's someone that they really like. That's where a guy like Jaden Peavy might be a guy that gets sacrificed as a result of that. Or, again, guys that might go on injured reserve. I still think that there's edge rusher / outside linebacker. I think corner is a possibility. Tight end's a possibility.
Yep.
I would not be shocked if at least 1 or 2 offensive linemen make the team as well through waiver claims.
Yeah. Shout out to our guy, Mike K.
Charlotte
Observer, pro wrestling fan as well. We talk wrestling whenever I'm around him. He had a list of guys, and one of the guys he listed, of course, was KJ Henry, Andre Carter, outside linebacker, Keenan Isaacs, cornerback, Zach McPherson as a cornerback. And then we talked about these two positions, wide receiver, tight end, Isaiah Hodgins as somebody possibly to have there, maybe even Alec Holler. And here's somebody to bring up.
Tight end from Dallas.
Here's somebody I was thinking about right here. The Chiefs cut your boy Kadarius Toney today.
Oh, no.
For speed?
No.
Take the top off?
No.
You wouldn't want it?
I like the skill. I don't like the head case.
I mean,
I don't like the head case.
Ted Ginn Jr. 2.0, you know what I'm saying? He's going to get past the defense. Will he catch it? I don't know, but that's the thrill of it. You know what I'm saying? So, but
it was a thrill, all right.
But maybe that's somebody they consider.
It's a possibility. I think I would stay away from Kadarius Toney. I would stay away. I'd stay away. No thanks. No thank you.
You don't want him? Okay.
No.
I mean, he's not needed, but if you felt like there's a weak spot in your wide receiver room, which, by the way, Dave Canales called it the strongest position group on the roster. I don't know if I agree with that.
Coming out of camp, yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that, but that's what he said. But if you're looking to upgrade, that's maybe one of the guys to look at.
I think their strongest group right now, probably middle linebacker. Probably. Might be their strongest group, actually, or safety. Safety might be their strongest.
I was just going to put the DBs in all together. I mean, especially now having Michael Jackson there, because like legit, once Dane Jackson comes back, and if Michael Jackson plays to the level that we think he can play, he's a former starter in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Who do you cut? Probably Deshaun Jameson, but really
probably Deshaun Jameson, because you have a draft pick tied up with Shaw Smith-Wade.
Yeah, but that is a hard decision. So I definitely think that, for me, I think the DB room in general, and I agree with you on the inside linebacker. I'm excited about the inside linebacker room.
There's a future there with Trevin Wallace for sure. Now, here's the thing. Couple of things to keep in mind, folks. Noon Wednesday, so depending on what time you're watching this, noon Wednesday is when waiver claims have to be made, and that's generally when basically we learn what who's going to be claimed by what team and where people are going to go. So we'll know that by noon on Wednesday. 1 p.m. Wednesday is when you can start signing players to your practice squad. So some of these guys that we saw got cut might get added back to the team, like our guy DiCaprio Boodle, maybe potentially a Jack Plummer, Jack Hammer, as you would like to call him. Maybe it's someone else like Michael Strom, practice squad Mike, might be a perfect fit over there as well. So there are guys that might be added back to the roster, to the practice squad. Alex Cook, Felipe Franks. There's a lot of different guys that potentially could be back on the team in a practice squad capacity. We'll start figuring that out at 1 p.m. on Wednesday.
Here's one thing I'll be interested to see how things shape up. And, we talked about some of the guys with injury designations. They have Jonathan Brooks on reserve non-football injury.
Yes. The reason for that is because his injury came outside of the NFL, because his injury happened. That's the reason why it works like the PUP list. That's what it is. So
I was wondering what the non-football thing was about, because okay, cool. So it's because he was not in the NFL. But all of those guys on those lists, basically, we know that they're going to be out for 4 weeks. So we'll be paying attention to that running back room, right? Like, who's going to look weak, because after 4 weeks, if Jonathan Brooks is ready, I don't know if he'll be ready in 4 weeks, but that person is probably the one to go. You talk about Amari Barno and DJ Wanham. There's going to be probably some places to trim some fat once those guys are ready, if they're going to be ready. So we'll be watching all of that. That's something that I'll be interested to see how things end up shaking out.
Make sure you subscribe here to Panthers Playbook, sponsored by our friends at Carolina Ford Dealers. With Ford F-150 on your team, it's game on. See your Carolina Ford dealer today. We'll have another episode for you all next week, because there's no game this weekend. But make sure you leave your thoughts in the comment section below. We'll see you guys next time.